This is Nolan Arenado. It's a name that the majority of the baseball-knowing population is aware of, mostly for his stellar defense and consistent hitting. But to a different segment of the population, Arenado's name is synonymous with one of the most hilarious sports card gaffes of all time. Allow me to share with you this wild story. Welcome to the Nolan Arenado Crisis. On November 15th, 2024, Topps released its annual holiday set. It's a set that collectors every year await excitedly for, not because it carries a high resale value, which it doesn't, but because it's a novelty release. Its appeal lies in its cost-effective nature, fun holiday-themed designs, and plenty of short-printed cards in every box. Essentially, these are cards less easy to find than normal base cards. Generally speaking, it's a great product for kids because they'll be able to get a high quantity of cards while not breaking the bank, and in the process, they'll get a set with fun variations. It's what parents would call cheap entertainment. Although it isn't a high-value set, there's still the expectation that your pack opening experience is going to be a quality one. But sometimes that's not the case, and it serves as a reminder to the topic that has always been a focal point for consumers, the quality control. Dating back to Topps' early years, quality control mistakes were fairly common, and you get atrocities like these. And though these do carry some value to oddball collectors, these quality control issues have plagued card companies forever. But every now and then there comes a trend in the card collecting world that baffles even the most seasoned of hobbyists. Following the holiday set's release date, nearly 3 weeks had passed with nothing seeming out of the norm. People were getting good variance between cards, and any repetition were anomalies. That is, until December 5th. Between major social media sites such as Facebook, Reddit, and X, also known as Twitter, collectors began posting their spreads of card H139. The base Nolan Arenado card. At first, these posts seemed like a prank and merely just a one-off, but to every card collector's surprise, this wasn't the case. This calendar will help paint a better picture of when these occurrences started, and by volume, how many happened each day. The barometer for documentation is either photo proof that this happened to someone or a comment with a reported number of Arenado cards someone had in their box or boxes. That last part is largely subjective, and that's why I did my best to include instances where it seemed like sarcasm was left out and the tone was rather intentful. Regardless, December 5th opened the floodgates to an epidemic that nobody saw coming. And out of virtually nowhere, 8 people reported online that boxes they purchased had experienced the misfortune of winding up with more Nolan Arenado cards than one knows what to do with. With enough of these copies to corner the market, some joked at these poor souls' expense, others pointed out that if it were mass quantities of Paul Skeens' card, they wouldn't be complaining, but I digress. At its absolute best, this card is better off as a fire starter than it is a collector's centerpiece. But who knew that a day later, on December 6th, 5 more people would be able to build fires of their own. Either the word hadn't gotten out fast enough, people had thought the odds didn't apply to them, or even just that they weren't following the crisis. But here we were at 13 unlucky people to rip open mass quantities of the Arenado card. One of the most commonly misquoted analogies around is the once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, and 3 times is a pattern saying. But the real quote ends with, and 3 times is enemy action. And if that phrase applied in this case, and Topps is the enemy, then what the hell is 13 times? It truly seemed like this mess was not ending anytime soon. And sure enough, on day 3, there were another 4 more people that fell victim to the Arenado crisis. One person went as far as to show the process from a sealed box to correctly predicting their misfortune.
Are you kidding?
H139 on the bottom, just like it's been going. One, two, three, four, 5. This ain't right.
At this stage, Topps was acknowledging that it was a known issue, and that they had issued a bad batch after receiving a large volume of calls. But the cat's out of the bag. Once you let it out, it's hard to catch that damn cat and put it back in. Why is that analogy about cats in bags? Are people putting cats in bags commonly? Turns out the phrase comes from a medieval scam, and I guess you learn something new every day. This Arenado story has nothing to do with that, I just got lost in my thoughts. Sorry about that. Anyways, with the total now at 17, there was reason for the general public to stop buying this product, and naturally instances of this would stop soon enough. On one hand, you'd have Topps seize all shipments, rendering the bad batch unable to hit store shelves, but also, on the other hand, you'd see that people had seen this whole thing go down and become unwilling to buy this product. What a bummer too. This is a Christmas-themed release, and we were coming up on Christmas Day with no one anyone urgently trying to buy these cards. And as fate would have it, these cases would eventually tail off only a few days after it had started in the first place. Between December 8th and December 15th, only 8 more people would share their Nolan Arenado misfortunes online. There would be an incredibly random X user on January 5th that caught a stray, but aside from that, there were 26 verified cases online of the Arenado crisis. You may think that the story ends here, right? Kinda. But I'm not one to look at this kind of thing and go, that was interesting, and move on. Nah, I like to look at the numbers behind the story, and for this, allow me to make some sense of it. I think the biggest question people had out of this were, how many of these cards got printed, and why did this happen? Now, I'm not exactly sure as to why, but I do think this is all funny as hell. I mean, how much more random can you get than having a Nolan Arenado holiday card as your quality control pariah? Honestly, it's about as random as you can get. But what wasn't random was the likely print run of this highly talked about card. There's seemingly 3 different outcomes that can explain how many copies are out there. According to people much smarter than myself and more capable of calculating print runs for your standard base cards, the average number of copies sits at around 311,000. I'm going to round these numbers for simplicity, just for the hell of it. But with that said, if this were a normal release and nothing astray happened, then this graphic would represent a normal dispersal of cards. Each dot represents a different player in the set, and with that you get approximately 62 million copies of the total base card print run. Nolan Arenado, card number 139, would fall right here. See? Completely average and nothing to see here. But if there's anything that we learned before is that there was something to see here. So let me show you the second outcome that maybe happened. This one is a bit more outlandish, so buckle up. On average, there were approximately 43 Nolan Arenado cards pulled from each holiday box. At least the ones that experienced this phenomenon. So with that in mind, I thought it would be worth exploring what it would look like if this happened to every single box in production. We already know this didn't happen, but what if it did? There were 100 cards that came standard in every holiday box, and if we take 43 Arenado cards as the average, we get our baseline percent of 43. With that ridiculously absurd percentage lined up to the total print run of over 62 million, Nolan Arenado would have approximately 26.7 million of his cards alone produced. But what about the remaining 199 players in this set? How many do each of them get? It's hard to believe, but from players not named Nolan Arenado, their print runs would be so minuscule that you would be able to obtain 150 Nolan Arenados before getting a duplicate of a different player. Compared to 26.7 million Arenados, every other player would have a little over 178,000 copies. It's not even a blip on the radar, but fortunately this wasn't the case, and this imaginary world of a Nolan nightmare didn't happen. Third, and lastly, a more plausible explanation. Topps during its release cycle prints batches of cards consistently, and it's likely that this issue is isolated to just one bad batch. This story stuck around long enough for people to grow conscious about it, but not long enough for the print runs to be dramatically impacted. It stands to reason that only about 5% of all boxes had this issue across the entire release. It may seem like a lot, but it only brings the average print run of a card from 311,000 to about 297,000. It hardly impacts anything, but yet increases the Arenado print run from 311,000 to 3.1 million. In all, this scenario can make sense, considering that people experience an influx of the card versus the remaining set. But what I haven't told you is that for as many people that were reporting they had gotten brutally unlucky, there were about 5 times as many of those saying that they had yet to pull an Arenado card, or had to be the last one for their set. As with life, there's balance, and in this case it seemed that perhaps there was a bulk of Arenado cards put in some, while shorting those that didn't get these unlucky boxes. In a weird way, I don't think there were more Arenado cards put into production than any other card, but rather it was a crazy bad quality control that bubbled up over a few-day period in early December. You can disagree with me, and to be honest, I'd love to hear your thoughts onto why and how this happened. However, it is fun to imagine an intern at Topps who was upset over something and his final straw was reached, prompting him to take every Nolan Arenado card printed and put them into every pack in sight. Who knows? Maybe that happened, or maybe it was just a crazy mistake. But whatever the case, Topps did eventually start making it right to those that experienced this. It's something that we'll likely never know why it happened, but in the end, I'm just thankful that it did. Because ultimately, that's baseball for you.